So what do we make of this hope? First, let's call this hope with an uppercase H. Our hope is grounded in Jesus. Our hope is in the incarnation of Jesus living and breathing and eating and walking among us. This is a hope that cannot be disappointed. The crowd surrounded Jesus in hope. Our hope is for the Gentiles, or this hope is for the Gentiles. And what that means is that this hope is not just for the Jewish people. It's for the entire world, every single one of us. And we believe that every individual, every family, every community, and every society can be transformed by the love of God. Hope lifts us up, even as bruised reeds or smoldering wicks. Jesus is there if we just call upon his name. Hope helps us to breathe easier. Jesus is present when we need healing. Jesus is protective when we feel vulnerable, and Jesus is powerful in the face of injustice. This hope envisions a better future. Now, the final consummation of all of God's work and activity throughout history ultimately ends in an act of redemptive love. And there's no better description of Christian hope that I have read than what is offered up by Daniel Migliore. It's from a book for our 9 o'clock class called Faith Seeking Understanding. So here's what Daniel has to say. Christians hope in the final victory of the creative, self-expending, community-forming love of the triune God. Hence, they hope in the triumph of the love of God over all hate, of the justice of God over all injustice, of God's freedom over all bondage, of community with God over all separation, of life with God over the power of death. Let me read that again. Christians hope in the final victory of the creative, self-expending, community-forming love of the triune God. Hence, we hope in the triumph of the love of God over all hate, of the justice of God over all injustice, of God's freedom over all bondage, of community with God over all separation, of life with God over the power of death. And he continues, yet this hope becomes indistinguishable from cheap optimism if it fails to share the present agony of the world. So this hope is not just a hope for the life beyond this one. This is a hope for this life as well. In the words of 19th century preacher Charles Sturgeon, a little bit of faith will carry your soul to heaven, but a great bit of faith will carry heaven to your soul. Now we stand as Christians with our hearts and our arms raised towards heaven, but we do that fully cognizant that our feet are firmly planted on this ground. Hope is a divine gift that calls us into partnership with God. So it is Jesus who ultimately brings justice to victory. But we are called into partnership with God to work towards life and healing and justice. Science and technology and economics and politics can never explain why we are here and what we are meant to do with our lives. However, in partnership with God, when we work towards something greater in hope and in service of God, we work towards a life that gives meaning with hope. And finally, hope is a choice. If you are a gardener, when you plant seeds, you choose hope when you ask God to make your crop bountiful so that it can nourish and feed others. If you're a parent, you choose hope when you raise your child up into a life of faith. If you're an economist or a politician, you choose hope when you use your expertise to tackle issues of social injustice or social policy. If you are a social worker, you choose a life of hope when you spend your time helping individuals to heal or bringing about reconciliation among families or communities. And if you are a friend, you choose hope when you reach out to another person with a word of hope and encouragement. And I can tell you, if you are feeling lonely or isolated right now, the best way to lean into a life of hope is to reach out with a word of encouragement to someone else. So no matter what you do, you choose hope when you are willing to be fully engaged in the task of living the life that God has given you to live.